We have some breaking developments in the search for the dad who the FBI says killed his 3 daughters, then vanished nearly 3 months ago. Agents say they found several items in a new search for Travis Decker, including bones. We're on the case, presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It has been nearly 3 months since this horrible story started and we first learned the name Travis Decker. Decker was the dad to 3 beautiful little girls, 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 5-year-old Olivia. You can see who they were in these pictures and just get an idea of the joy that they brought into this world. Decker, their dad, was an Army veteran. He had experience in the outdoors, which perhaps explains why, since the end of May, no one has been able to find him. Not the U.S. Marshals, not the FBI, not the local sheriff's office, or the countless volunteers who have helped in the search. And the truth is, still, the FBI says it is unclear if Decker is dead or alive. This week, the FBI closed off parts of Rock Island Campground in Leavenworth, Washington, to search for clues that could help lead them to Travis Decker. And I'll get to what items they reportedly found in just a moment and what it means in this manhunt. But let's go back to June 2nd, when the bodies of Decker's girls were found at that campground. The next part of the story, it's not easy to say because we recently learned that those girls died of suffocation, that they had multiple separate plastic bags over their heads and cables tied around their bodies per the local sheriff's office. And the new development with that is that DNA came back this month and showed that Decker, according to law enforcement, is the only suspect in these murders. His DNA was found on the evidence that was collected at the scene. Decker was last seen by his ex-wife, the mother of his children, a couple days prior on May 30th. Decker picked up the 3 girls for a planned visitation. His ex-wife said that Decker said, "I'll see you tonight around 8" before he left, and he never returned. His ex-wife then called police. When the bodies of the 3 girls were found, the search for this former Army soldier began. And these are the images that law enforcement first put out, showing what Decker may look like if he were still alive. The U.S. Marshals are offering $20,000 as a reward for information leading to his capture. And these are the surveillance images that law enforcement put out, showing Decker prior to allegedly taking his daughters. Then we received body camera video showing him in a fender bender that happened just days before the murders. Here he is standing with officers in a grocery store parking lot back on May 27th of this year. That is 3 days before he left with his daughters. Even though law enforcement searched aggressively for Decker, they have not been able to find him. And last month they said they were pulling back resources in this search.
I want to be clear that currently we have no evidence that Travis Decker is alive or dead.
But this week, the FBI closed down that area around the campground, around the crime scene where these girls were found. They launched a new search with 100 agents searching a quarter-mile radius around the crime scene where the girls were found dead.
We have no evidence that Travis Decker is alive or dead, but we are conducting a grid search operation over the next 2 days. It's currently taking place right now. We hope to find evidence that will lead us to Travis Decker or any information regarding the murder of his 3 daughters. By thoroughly searching and documenting the area, we can help prevent the need to review the area in the future by collecting all possible evidence.
The FBI said they found items they're now processing to determine if they're linked to Travis Decker. Perhaps the most noteworthy item that we've learned about is a set of bones that agents found. The FBI spoke to the Wenatchee World newspaper, which is the local newspaper in the central Washington community where all of this is taking place. And the FBI said it is unclear if those bones are that of a human being, and if they are of a human being, it's still unclear at this point whether they're Travis Decker's. More work needs to be done on that. It could take weeks to learn whether they're Travis Decker's bones. The newspaper also notes that in the past, the FBI says that they found the remains of an overdose victim. So even if it is a human being, it's not entirely out of question for it to be someone else other than Travis Decker. Now, the sheriff said this week before the search that they didn't have any new evidence to share in their case and their investigation into Travis Decker. As far as how long it could take to get answers to learn whether Travis Decker is alive, whether Travis Decker is dead, that is anyone's guess. And the sheriff even said it could take years. I want to take a moment and thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law & Crime YouTube takeover. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys and they win a lot. They've recovered more than $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. Even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to start a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you've been injured and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. Law enforcement said Decker was homeless at the time of the girls' murders. He had lived in motels and hotels, campgrounds, even his car. His ex-wife said he had suffered from mental health issues. Her attorney told ABC News that Decker's ex-wife believes that the system let her ex-husband down because he lacked the resources to get mental health help. The attorney also said the Deckers got divorced in 2023 and Travis's mental stability was one of the reasons why. Decker was allowed to see the girls for 3 hours on Fridays and 8 hours every other weekend as long as he stayed in the area of Washington where they lived. That was per ABC News. Here's part of what Whitney Decker, Travis Decker's ex-wife, the mother of the 3 girls who lost their lives, said at a memorial service about her daughters per Como Television.
I'm so thankful for the time that I had with the girls and how the 3 feelings allowed us to connect when the world slowed down. And it really gave me an inside look into their day. I believe doing this with them allowed them to come into the world with open hearts and kindness.
Joining us now to talk more about this is missing persons private investigator Steve Fisher. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. And I know you've been involved, not in this search, but in searches for people in places like where they're searching and have been for Travis Decker. In this most recent search, it was a 1/4-mile radius, they say, surrounding the crime scene where the bodies of these 3 girls were found. I think for some of us who may hear that, you're like, it doesn't sound like you would need 100 agents to search that. It doesn't sound that big. But I mean, how difficult is it to search a 1/4-mile radius for evidence?
Well, and I realized that, bones were found. But I think what they're really doing at that point is they're doing a line search where literally people are shoulder to shoulder, arm lengths out. You're all stepping together, stopping, pausing, looking. And what you're looking for there is not really the body, but you're looking for evidence and sign cutting, things that give you an idea. Maybe they're backing up and saying, okay, we got to figure out which way he went or what he did. So they could be looking for everything from brush that's been pushed down where it shouldn't have been. It would show signs of him and you could track him from there. It could be shell casing. It could be food wrappers. It can be anything that could possibly be tied to him. I think what they're trying to do is just get a direction on him, most likely. Because when they're that tight, their primary focus probably is not looking for human remains.
Well, and I would think too, I mean, if his remains, and I know they found some bones,
Yeah.
But they, it's been almost 3 months, and I would have assumed that area would have been, the direct area surrounding the crime scene that that area has been looked at before. It's a morbid question, but I mean, for the bones that were found, I mean, if Travis Decker was dead and his body was somewhere that someone missed in the initial days that they started searching, I mean, how much would be left of the remains, especially after summer, the summer months? And I mean, what exactly are you looking for if you're looking for remains?
Well, he'd probably be skeletalized by this point, but that doesn't prevent a forensic anthropologist from being able to, get DNA and know that they're him, kind of like in the Brian Laundrie case. But you know, there's other things that they probably, it would be surprising if they actually found him. I think in that radius. I also, to not know positively if those were human or animal bones is kind of surprising to me, because although maybe the people on the field can't make an immediate determination, a local medical examiner most likely would be able to. So that tells me, one, that they're either in really bad shape, which probably means they were older. And they have found other people on these searches. They found somebody that OD'd. People do pass away and go missing in the woods. So there's other remains out there, but they could be animal. They could be animal. They could be something that Travis Decker was eating. He's got to sustain himself out there, and he could be, catching or trapping rabbits or whatever it may be, and cooking. And so there could be other signs, and they're probably just trying to tie him to I think they just need a determinate path of travel. And it's, there's a lot of resources on this. But the other thing that they said during the press conferences, they mentioned, the FBI resources and even, Customs Border Patrol, who we've seen insert themselves, not in a good way, in a lot of these high profile cases lately. They have amazing detection ability, and they brought up canines, electronic canines. And so these are canines, a lot of federal and state law enforcement agencies have them, that are actually trained to detect electronics, discarded hard drives, cell phones, and things like that are high evidentiary value. So it seems like they have those canines out there. So maybe they're looking for a phone or something.
Knowing that they have, I mean, there was, like, I go back to June 2nd, which is when this story first came to light, and then the weeks after it, there was a big search. I mean, this was a national news story, and rightfully so. And I think of the resources, like you're saying, U.S. Marshals, FBI, everything that comes with that, and yet there's just like no sign of there's no trace beyond the crime scene. And I know that he has survival training from the Army, and would last certainly longer in the wilderness than I would. But at the same time, like, even if you have that survival training, like, how far does that go in outrunning those resources from all of those agencies?
Personally, I don't think he's alive, but I'm also not involved in this case. And there's certainly people that know a lot more about it than me. However, there becomes, like you said, there's that inflection point where it's like, okay, yeah, I have the ability to survive out there, but not only can I keep doing that, but do I want to? This could be a guy that, I mean, he knows what his fate is if he's caught, and he probably made a determination when he went on the run that maybe he was going to have, go down in a shootout with him. Maybe he just decided, hey, I've had enough, and he's taken himself out. The fact that they had those massive amount of resources out there and weren't able to pick up a heat signature from him, at the beginning, I can understand maybe why they missed him on the ground while they're searching, because what they're doing is they're not going on a line search. They're a little bit broader, but they're also using heat detection capability, thermal capability, and to not pick him up makes me think that he's either dead and not putting off a heat signature by then, or he's further out of the area. But I think the probability of him being alive, at least just my own personal opinion, I think is pretty low right now.
Because so the last time he was seen alive is when he picks up his daughters for this, like, visit that he was supposed to have. That was on May 30th. Their bodies are found June 2nd. So that's kind of the window between when this happened. I mean, I guess, how long does it take for that heat signature or anything like that to just disappear and vanish? Like, how much of a headway do you get with the 24 to 48 hours where people didn't know where he was and where these girls were?
Well, the heat signature will be coming off him directly. So that's going to, it's not going to, in other words, it doesn't, you pass through an area, you're not leaving so much a heat trail. It's a heat signature confined to you. But as let's say he took himself out, he will be putting off a heat signature for 5 or 6 days, a smaller one. But what we're looking for in there is what's called delta value, the difference between that heat and the ambient temperature and the ground temperature. And one thing that's good in that area is it does get pretty, it gets cold. So you have that. So even for a decomposing cadaver, those gases still have certain temperatures to them. And so you can pick that up. But only for 5, 6 days, and that most likely he probably traveled just out of that area as quick as he could for a couple days before he made any decision. And so, you know, and that's wide open wilderness, and not knowing which direction he started, it's really hard, you know.
When you see cases where, and you know, even in cases, I know you do missing persons cases where it's not a foul play situation, it's just
Mhm.
someone who doesn't want to be found. And when you think of the resources for this, I mean, typically, what is the reason that someone, beyond just, I mean, obviously he's in this big forest and it's a rural part of the country, vast wilderness, I get that, but like, what typically is the reason that someone can get away without leaving much of a trail? What do they do that just seems to make it really difficult to find them?
So it's, it's getting out of the immediate area as quick as you can, and then leaving, no trace, whether it be using like booty covers for the shoes and not leaving prints like that, making sure you don't leave any trash or anything behind like that, because that's what they're looking for. Their man trackers that they're putting out front of the search team are doing what's called sign cutting. They're looking for areas that have been patted down by footprints. There's which way they're going, brush, higher brush that may have been, you can tell has been, walked through, because these are areas that nobody else will be walking through. And they're leading those man trackers are, and then the teams are coming behind them and do more of a thorough search. And that can be a very slow process, figuring out. But it's amazing, what they can do. They can figure out if a person's injured by the way that the indentations of the footprints. If they're putting more pressure on one side than the other. I mean, these people are trained in that, which I'm not. Have amazing capabilities. So, but I don't think they picked up much of that, to be honest with you. So I don't know. Maybe he traveled a more known trail that there was lots of footprints on, so they can't determine anything, and then got miles out of the area and then ducked out into the more road areas. And it can be literally impossible, especially if he's dead now. At some point he's gonna, if he's alive, he's leaving some sort of footprint, whether it be an actual footprint or digital footprint or whatever it may be, somewhere, and he's having to survive somehow. But if he's dead, boy, it's a lot of country to find remains, because he probably is curled up in a shelter type of natural shelter, whether it be in a rock cave or whatever. It can just be a real task, but they seem very committed to it, seeing it through.
Yeah, and it was I thought there was a good quote. I think it was from the FBI agent who was doing the news conference, and he said, if he were to be alive, that he has to be perfect every single day, and we just need to be perfect one time.
That's
Because it's
right.
like the second he makes a mistake or leaves a trace behind, if he were still to be alive. How common though is it that someone, because it seems, I mean, 3 months, this seemed to be a case that went cold pretty quickly for them. Um, how common is it that you would have a case where it just seems like the FBI has no clue where he is whatsoever?
Well, I do think that they have a clue. I think that even if they're determined, like, he traveled through a common area and then split off. I think they have a good idea of what he did. They're having to go back and cover everything. They're looking for other evidence probably now. There'd be little things, he could have dropped. Maybe a SIM card or a burner or something like that. But uh, you know, just because they're FBI or just because they're Marshal Service and whatnot, they're not magicians. They can't. It's if a person's got a head start on you, and especially if they're deceased. Now, they're the odds of them evading for more and more months are a lot lower if they're alive. But when they're dead, it can become possible because you don't know what they were. That person's hiding at night when they want to sleep. That they're finding areas that are really difficult to be seen, whether it be in rock caves or even up in trees and wherever it may be. And if they succumb and just said, "Hey, I'm done," and they take their life there, it can be possible unless an animal then drags those bones out over time, which animals do scatter bones because the salt in the bones and whatnot. And then so that could start happening. Or after a huge storm, sometimes we'll see remains start shifting and moving around just as the elements move around.
That was my next question is, if he's dead and he, maybe he, whatever way he took his own life, and maybe he did it in a way where he didn't want to be found, and he put
Yeah.
it there. And then, I mean, what's the window of time that law enforcement would have to find those remains before it's reasonable to believe that we'll never know what happened to Travis Decker after this?
That time may have already passed as far as determining a cause and manner of death, unless it was, listen, if it's a, say, suicide with a firearm, there'll be a sign of that firearm there, and then also the bones themselves, a skull would show that. But as far as any other clues, we probably lost that unless it was in his clothing. He left some sort of note, which could be the case. He could write and be one of these people that writes a manifesto, we don't know about. And that's another reason to make sure to find him. But as far as his body itself, beyond identification at this point, it's probably not going to be super helpful as far as figuring out why he did what he did.
Right. Yeah. It's fascinating that, when it happened, and it seems like he was able to, in some ways, cover his tracks in the early stages, and what happened to him, maybe we'll never know, but the search continues. FBI seems that from what they're saying, and the sheriff, they're in it for the long haul. They were talking about it taking years and trying to set a base. So one day, whoever is the sheriff in that county, that they'll have information to go with. Steve Fisher, missing persons private investigator. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for helping us.
Thanks for having me.
Travis Decker is considered armed and dangerous. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.